Okay, so welcome all to this webinar. I'm really excited for you all to be here, mostly because I'm really biased and I love couples. Anything connected to couples is like my jam, which if you talk to any other therapist, they'll be like, that's weird because couples are hard or couples are difficult or whatever, right? But I have a passion for helping people connect in their relationships, whether that's in their couple relationships or in family relationships or friends or whatever, because as a human being, I believe that it's all about relationships. We are relational people. So I'm excited for you to all be here. And like I said, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have some good engagement. I wanted to start by showing you all a brief video. You may have seen this video before, but I like to show it because it kind of emphasizes a key aspect of both relationships in general, but also specifically what I'm hoping to cover in my presentation tonight. Okay. So if the technology is on my side tonight, this should work without any issue. But if anyone can't hear the sound or whatever for any reason, I am sharing sound, but if you can't hear it, like please let me know and I'll adjust. So here is the video. And as you watch this, I just want you to think like, have you seen that play out in your relationship before at all or in other people's relationships? But here we go.
It's just there's all this
Sure.
pressure,
You know,
you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Try to see things my way.
All right. So humorous, hopefully. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's like super old at this point. It's like an 11-year-old video, right? But as a therapist, it's something that we've been shown like in every class I think I've ever taken on relationships. Anyone ever experienced something like that before? Probably, I would assume. Most people, right? You have these moments or these dynamics where it's like, you're trying to connect and you're trying to make sense of something, but it just doesn't quite go as well as you'd hope, right? And obviously there are some gender stereotypes, being shown in that video, right? Of like the man trying to fix things and the woman in this relationship just wanting to be heard, right? But the reality is that both male and female and whatever your background is, we both have needs, right? Needs to be heard and needs to get out of problems. And as a couples therapist, I'm a big proponent for how do we find a good middle ground where both can be accomplished? Because I do believe that's possible, even if you might feel like it's difficult to get there, right? And so to that point, in this presentation today, regardless of whatever marketing message you got in coming to this webinar or whatever you heard about to get here, my whole goal for tonight is to help you see some of what I call the secrets for relationships and what can make them better. Now, the kind of point behind this webinar is to directly address concerns that people who are engaged or about to get married or who have been recently been married, how they can make their relationships better. Hopefully, the majority of you are in that category. And if not, then you're probably in a category of like, hey, we just want like something out of this webinar. So again, I hope to be able to provide that for you. But to get on with it then, I'm going to just share my screen again. And I'm going to share a little presentation with you all, I should say. And I'm going to change how this looks so that I can see people. Well, maybe not. All right, we'll just go on. Now, during this, if you have something to ask me or you want to chime in at all, please just like unmute yourself and just talk, because if you try to send a message through the chat, there's a good chance I'll see it, but also a good chance I'll miss it. So again, if you have something to say or want to stop and talk about something, please let me know and I'll stop sharing my screen and we can chat, because again, that's what I want this to be. Okay, so how do we create this lasting relationship then? Or if you're, already past the commitment phase of in a marriage, right? How do you continue that? Well, a little bit about me, because I like to be personable. I like people to know who I am. Like I said at the beginning, my name is Spencer. I've been married for, wow, going on 10 years this year with my wife. We have two kiddos. I've only got the one in this picture. It's a little bit outdated. Uh, but anyways, this is my oldest. He's now 4, and this is my youngest. He's now 2. So they're firecrackers. I love them. 2 boys chasing around all the time. I grew up in Cache Valley, so mountain biking is a huge thing for me. I'm also a drummer. I play the drum set and a couple of hand instruments. Have a couple of cats that I really love. Grew up with dogs. Anyways, I won't get into all that. But that's a little bit about me and my life. Here's what I want to be able to really get into today, okay? I want to cover one thing about relationships that many people talk about, but don't really talk about. I want to talk about the 3 secrets to a deep and lasting relationship and some elements that can help us get there. And then we'll talk a little bit about your next steps and provide hopefully plenty of opportunity for you all to ask me any questions you might have. And so just so you all know, my presentation style is to be pretty brief and concise, because I really do want to provide lots of space for questions, specifically that you might have that I can help you with, okay? So again, during the presentation, you got questions, let me know, or we can save that all for the end. But here's the one thing about relationships that everyone seems to know, and they may even talk about it, but they don't like to talk about it. And even if they do talk about it, like I said, my experience, both personally and professionally, is that people don't really like to actually talk about it. They kind of skirt around the issue or avoid it. And that is that relationships are hard. Now, obviously, I'm talking specifically about romantic relationships here, but that's the thing that I noticed, right? No one really seems to actually talk about this. Maybe your like great aunt says, oh, relationships are hard and make sure you work at it or whatever, or you might have gotten those types of advice points. But at the end of the day, what do you do with that, right? Now, I like to look at this a little bit differently than just relationships are hard, because yeah, there's certain difficulty about relationships, but if relationships were so hard that it wasn't worth it, no one would get married, right? No one would stay in a relationship with anyone for any period of time, period, right? And so there's more to it than just relationships are hard. And what I believe is that relationships are hard, but they are simple. Now, you may hear that and be like, well, what the crap does that mean, Spencer? Like, that's kind of a oxymoron kind of thing, right? But hear me out for a second. When you really boil relationships down to their core elements, the elements that you're left with are actually quite simple, basic things or concepts, things like communication is way more simple than I think we actually make it out to be. You can talk with coworkers, you can talk with friends, yet when you get in conflict with a partner or spouse, it all of a sudden becomes really hard, right? Which I'll get more into that in a second. Principles like ownership, empathy, those types of things are actually quite simple if you look at them as like concepts, individually anyways, right? But yet relationships are still hard. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but if you can look at relationships like this, that like, yes, relationships are hard, but also they are simple, that hopefully should give you some room to like back off of issues sometimes and be able to look at it from a simplified way, I guess, to be able to find resolution or work towards finding your happiness in the context of your relationship. So there are 3 things that I want to briefly talk about that I believe are secrets to a lasting relationship and their associated myths, okay? I'm going to start with the myths. Now, again, I wanted to present it this way because if you're in that category of, dating or engaged or newly married, you've probably heard a lot of things from a lot of different people, whether that's online, friends, or family, about relationships, right? And not all of those things we hear are accurate or right. And I want to kind of debunk some of these key myths that I think will help create a lasting relationship for you and your partner. Okay, so here's the first one. The myth is when things go wrong, it's impossible to know why or how to fix them. Hopefully, at this stage in your relationship, you haven't had a ton of conflicts or issues. But if you have, or you've had even just small ones here and there, this is something that oftentimes we get stuck thinking, right? Like the video of It's Not About the Nail. It feels like no solution can be found, or that there's not a reliable way to really figure out how to make it better. And maybe this is a belief that we kind of personally just struggle with, right? Of like, man, it's just impossible to fix this thing. But here's what I view as the truth connected to this myth. The secret is there's actually a predictable pattern to interactions, and we can change them. Now, in the course that I've made for premarital counseling, we talk a lot about this, right? Like, how do you recognize your patterns in your relationship? And tonight I'm going to talk briefly about that as well, but I'll go into much more detail in the course. But in essence, if you look at your relationship and when things go wrong or when things go well, there's usually a pattern behind what creates that, right? Again, either the negative or the positive. And oftentimes, if you allow yourselves to be reflective on, like, wow, what makes me feel really connected to you in this relationship? Or wow, what makes me feel really disconnected or not even want to be around you in this relationship? You'll probably identify a set of triggers, or things that can start either that positive or that negative process for you. And if you can identify that, then you can start to get curious about, well, when those things happen, how do I typically feel? And what am I thinking in those moments? Then you can start to go deeper into, like, oh yeah, when my partner does this, I tend to feel this way. And when I feel that way, I tend to react in this way, right? Now, this is where therapy or taking a course like what I'm offering can be extremely valuable because it kind of like forces you to slow down. But this is something that you can totally do on your own, right? Spend some time sitting down, talking with your partner about this, thinking about it yourself. If you're an artist or not even an artist, but just like to doodle things out, right? You can write it down, right? Like a big circle, right? When this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And for most people that I work with in therapy or that I see outside of therapy, if they can identify that pattern, then like with a high level of accuracy, you can know, oh, when that thing happens, I'm going to then go to this place. And that's why it's not unsolvable. It's not impossible to resolve this stuff. We just have to slow ourselves down enough to get there, right? So there's this acronym that I like that I share in module 1 of the course that I briefly wanted to talk about here. And it's CPR, right? You provide CPR to someone who's, choking or whatever. This is CPR for your relationship. The C stands for catch. Specifically, what I mean by that is, can you catch your negative patterns when they happen? And can you catch your positive ones when they happen, right? This is more than just noticing. It's noticing and like physically catching it and saying to your partner, I'm noticing this is happening right now, to me, to us, that kind of deal, right? The P stands for pause. Now, in the context of a negative interactional pattern, that literally means you just stop whatever it is you're doing. Now, for most of the couples that I work with in therapy, that pause means an actual physical break from each other, right? Because if you're in a negative pattern, most likely you are, upsetting each other. And to stay in the same proximity, your nervous system will never be able to calm down. And so you have to get space. Now, those of you out there some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's a great idea, Spencer. Then we'll never resolve it, right? We'll never talk about it. Well, that's because there's another point here, okay? After you pause, right, you've taken that break, then the reconcile part is the coming back together, okay? Now, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it now. If you're in a negative pattern that's not huge, right? Meaning you're not really escalated, you're not really in a big fight kind of thing, right? It's just a minor thing, but you're feeling a little bit upset. Oftentimes that pause can just look like a, hey, wait a minute. we need to recenter ourselves. We're not focusing on one another. We're trying to, blame the other person or fix the issue before we really understand the issue, things like that. And so you might just kind of recognize it, kind of take a deep breath, and then continue to talk, right? Well, the reconcile piece is when you come back together. Now, I could spend a whole nother webinar on what it means and what it looks like to reconcile, right? Just that one piece. But to put it simply here, reconcile essentially means that when you come back together, you're trying to express two key things. First, you're trying to express what was your pain, right? What was the thing that you felt that was disconnecting for you? What brought about that disconnect? I'm not saying you talk about what created that or what happened, but you talk about the feeling that it sparked for you. You'll get lost if you try to spend too much time talking about what happened. It just doesn't work because each of you have different perspectives and it probably won't work, right? But if you say, hey, when such and such maybe happened, I felt this pain, then you can get hopefully an empathetic response and be able to move forward easier, right? So that's the first thing, right, with reconciling. It's talking about what your pain is. The second part of reconciling is being able to talk about what you need now to be reconnected. Now, I want to be very particular about what I'm saying here, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying what do you need in the future or in the past, because that's what people tend to focus on, right? It's like, well, next time I need you to not do this. Great. That might be part of the discussion, but we really need to focus as much as we can on what is the need in the now to feel reconnected, right? So for example, you might say something like, I just need you to tell me that like I'm good enough. Or I just need a hug right now to know that like you're still here with me, kind of thing, right? It's something in the present moment that can help you reconnect. Because if you focus too much on what you need to reconnect tomorrow or next time, you're missing an opportunity to actually come together. And that's what reconciling is all about. It's about coming back together. So again, CPR. C, catch the interactional pattern. P, pause it. And R, reconcile. Here's secret number 2. The myth is we need to have a bunch of relationship skills to have a lasting relationship. I hear this all the time. Couples come in to see me and they're like, Spencer, teach us how to communicate. And I always like want to bang my head against my desk because like, hear me out. You know how to communicate. Communication is not the issue. It's what happens when it goes wrong that is the issue. You have different protections that come out that become problematic, which I'll talk about here in a second. And so, I mean, just to put it bluntly, like you can communicate just fine at work, probably, right? Or you can communicate just fine with, family or people like that, friends, Communication is not really the issue, and skills are usually not the issue, right? Like, oh, if I just used I statements more, it'd be better or whatever. The reality is I've seen couples connect beautifully with like 0 relationship skills. And guess what? As a couples therapist, I can tell you that I probably have a lot of relationship skills and I still struggle in my relationship. I still have moments where I get caught in negative patterns with my wife. It happens, right? So the skills is not really the most helpful thing. Here's the thing, right? Relationship skills come with time. This is the secret. So focus on the cores of your relationship to create a lasting one, okay? It's not about skills, it's about how do you actually connect. So for example, you could read every book on the planet about relationships and still have the worst relationship in the world. Because unless you learn how to properly connect with your partner or spouse, those relationship skills don't mean a lot. They help. Yes, they do help. I will say that they help, but they won't take you very far if that's all you focus on. Rather, focusing on what do I need to feel connected to you and what do you need to feel connected to me is really the thing I would encourage you to focus on. So here's that thing I was hinting at, right? These protections. And I cover this more in module 1 of the course as well. But these are why relationship skills tend to fail, is because you can have all the skills in the world, but if your protections come out, those skills go straight out the window, right? It's like, for example, if a bear were to just walk into your room right now, you wouldn't just, try to use skills to like get through that situation, you'd probably just like run away or something, right? Your body just throws you into protection mode. Again, skills can help create a better protection potentially, but it's not the end all, right? So, but here's why these protections, what these protections can look like. The first is fight, right? You want to go at it. You want to resolve the issue with your partner right then and there, right? You don't want to walk away from it. You want to just deal with it until it's done, right? The other is flight, which is the exact opposite. You try to get away from your partner or spouse, right? You try to change the topic or the conversation to just get away from it, period. You might freeze, which looks like, staying but not being present. So another word for this is called stonewalling. It's kind of like, I just can't talk anymore. And so I'm just going to sit here until you like eventually burn out from talking, in essence, right? But it's a protection, right? And then the final one is fawning, which isn't talked about very often, but fawning is in essence kind of blaming yourself for the problems. It's the type of person that says, I'm sorry, it's my fault. Like, you're right, I'm wrong. Like, let's just move on kind of thing, right? That's fawning. It's a self-sacrificing thing to try to move on from something, but ultimately it doesn't work because you have needs too if you're a fawner, right? So those are some of the protections that get in the way of our relationship skills, because when our nervous system tells us we don't feel safe and we need to protect ourselves, relationship skills go. So again, focusing on those patterns and slowing ourselves down to be able to talk about what we are actually feeling and what we need is the best way to work through different things, right? So with this, and in modules 2 and 4 of the course, we talk much more about this. One of the things I love about premarital counseling and the particular process that I go through with the couples I work with in it is that I like to have couples take this assessment. It's called the SYMBIS assessment, which is basically like a glorified personality test for your relationship. And so it helps you to know these things a little bit better, but just to kind of give you like a preview, if you will, or to help you understand like what's the most important things to know to be able to have a lasting relationship, well, here they are. First and foremost, you got to know yourself. Whenever I work with a couple, I always will jokingly tell them, but I'm also serious about this. I'll say, hey, if you want a golden ticket out of couples therapy, it's going to be to focus on yourself more than you focus on your partner or spouse. Simply put, you have to know yourself to be able to help yourself, especially when it comes to talking about what you need in the relationship, right? So first and foremost, focus on getting to know yourself, right? What are my needs? What are my tics? What are my pains? What helps me feel connected in this relationship? So that's first. Also, I should add, know your history, right? We all come into relationships with baggage. Are you aware that if you have daddy issues, it's going to probably come into the relationship, or mommy issues for that matter, right? If you have trauma from previous relationships, that's going to impact how you relate to, the world and especially to your partner. So know yourself. It helps so much. Next is know your partner, right? All those things that you figured out for yourself, you should get very curious about what those things look like for your partner. Because again, if you don't know them, you might find yourself tripping over them later, right? And we don't want that. So learn to know your partner, right? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What do they need? What helps them to feel connected to you? Those kinds of things. And then finally, know your relationship. And what I mean specifically by this is know the patterns that you tend to get stuck in your relationship. That's one of the best things that you can do to create a lasting relationship. Because, guys, everyone has conflict and distance at times in their relationship. That's not a sign that the relationship is doomed or hopeless. It's just part of being in relationships. Knowing that kind of stuff and then doing something about it is what will help hopefully create that lasting relationship. Okay, secret number 3. The myth is a good relationship doesn't need therapy. Now, I know, I'm biased. I'm a therapist, so of course I would say that, right? But here's the thing, okay? The research tends to show that if couples do some form of premarital counseling, they're 61% less likely to get divorced, which is hugely significant because statistically, and I don't know if this is super presently, it's probably worse now, honestly, but the typical marriage, it has like a 50-50 chance of getting divorced within the first 7 years. And then after that, the chances of divorce go up. And if it's a second marriage, your chances of divorce can almost double, which is crazy, right? Like divorce is a very prominent thing in the US in particular. And so this idea that a good relationship doesn't need therapy, and that if you are in therapy or, doing something like a webinar, like what you're doing tonight, that somehow that means your relationship is bad, is just absolutely not the case. In fact, some of the best relationships are those that have gone through a process to learn more about themselves and to dive deeper into things, right? Now, again, obviously I'm biased because I'm a therapist, and I want you all to go to therapy because it would probably help you and society if you did. There are some countries in Europe where and even in the US, I think there are some states that do this, but you have to go through like a premarital counseling course or something, right? Before you can get your marriage license. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but there's good reasons for doing things like that. But here's the thing. Going through some type of process, whether that's attending a webinar like this, reading some books about how to recognize these different patterns and how to get better, that kind of thing, or doing the more intensive kind of personalized experience like therapy, are all things that I would strongly advocate for, and doing what fits within your means, right? Because the investment you put into your relationship will literally pay off better than any other investment that I think you can make in life, period. I know that's a bold statement, but the research is pretty clear on this. People who are in long-lasting, healthy relationships tend to live longer. They have less health issues. They tend to be better off financially, and other things like that, right? So again, do the work because it'll be worth it in the long run, I promise. So kind of as we look to wrap up, I just wanted to share this like shift in the paradigm of doing therapy, okay? That, for a long time, I've been working with couples who are on the brink of divorce, an affair has just happened, or a big betrayal, or they're realizing they've been together for 20 years and actually hate each other. And it's like, by the time they come into my office, they're like bleeding out, right? They're almost dead, and I'm trying to like resuscitate them. And then I started to wonder, like, what would it be like if I just went to the problem and tried to fix it there? And that's where my passion for premarital counseling comes into play, where it's like, can we shift the paradigm away from let me pull you out of the river when you're drowned half to death, and let me go to the place where you fell in and try to fix that thing so that you don't fall in the first place, right? Now, again, premarital counseling isn't necessarily going to prevent bad things from happening in your relationship or from, it ending in divorce or something, but it greatly increases your odds of that not happening later, right? Just like if you are hiking in the mountains and there's a bridge over a river, you're a lot less likely to fall in than if it just has one of those like sketchy logs over the middle that are always wet for some reason, right? So that's the shift of the paradigm. So I want to ask you guys a question, right? This has been a lot. I've covered a lot of different pieces of information. And my question is just like, can I share something with you? Okay. Now, I'm assuming the answer is yes, so I'm just going to move forward anyways. But I wanted to just take a moment to like have you pause all of us, kind of like take a deep breath and be like, okay, like we just learned all this different stuff about relationships and what can make them last longer and things like that. But in essence, I want to present to you all a way to make it really count, if that makes sense. So this is a quote I found by a lady named Barbara DeAngelis. To be honest, I don't know who she is, but this is a beautiful quote, okay? She says, "Marriage is not a noun, it's a verb. It isn't something you get, it's something you do. It's the way you love your partner every day." And so, again, even this webinar that we're doing today can only take you so far, right? And maybe this is all that you need. But like I said, I want to strongly encourage you to be reflective on what does my relationship need, and what do we feel like is going to set us up for success in the long term, okay? And so one of the things that we can offer you is this Blueprint for a Lasting Relationship course. And I want to just outline 4 main things that I think that this course will give you so you can determine if it makes sense for you or not, right? The first is understanding. Like I said, this course and the way I've presented it is all about setting your relationship up for long-term success by being able to identify some key concepts and techniques that are more than just relationship skills, but actually taking into account your unique personality and your relationship's personality and finding things that are more likely to work for you. Okay. The next thing on top of that is that it is this relationship personality test, right? So it's much more specific to just like understanding you generally. It's understanding you specifically and the unique dynamics that play into your relationship. So on top of that understanding and that personality test for your relationship, we also cover some of the things that couples tend to struggle with most. A good premarital counseling course or therapy will help you to identify potential blind spots that you might be up against. So in the course of all the modules, really from 2 to 6, we covered different topics like money, sex, physical intimacy in general, chores and expectations around that, in-laws. We also cover things like how to know like the baggage that you're bringing into the relationship and how to be aware of that, budgeting, like different things that hopefully will help you avoid those blind spots. And to also provide a blueprint for the future, right? I want you all to have confidence that your relationship is not only going to survive for the rest of your lives, but that you can thrive, that you can create a deep and lasting relationship, one that is full, right? One that brings you true joy and connection. And that's something that I feel strongly this course can help you to do. So if you're wanting to take us up on this special offer for tonight, we are offering this course at a special price for $299 for the course, right? It's called This Blueprint for the Lasting Relationship. Now, to put this into context, a typical session of couples therapy can range usually anywhere between $150 to $250 per session, right? In Cache Valley, that's typical for here. So for the cost of about anywhere between 1 to 2 sessions of therapy, maybe 3, depending on where you're going, you can get a 7-week course led by me talking about these specifics of your relationship. I believe, and we believe at Cache Valley Counseling, that this is an investment well spent. If you're interested, here's a QR code you can scan right now. And if I can get there, in the chat box, I'll share a link as well. But here's where I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And like I said, I'm just going to put in the chat that link. But you guys, I've got until 8 o'clock technically. Okay. I would love it if you have any questions for me specific to, what I talked about, specific to the course, even if you have questions. But I just want to make this like time well spent for you guys. Okay. So again, if you have any questions about what we talked about, or if you have any questions about like anything random connected to relationship dynamics or things like that, I'd love to be able to give space for that. And if no one has any questions, then we'll just wrap up a little bit early. But yeah, I wanted to make sure to give plenty of space for questions. So you guys tell me, like, what are some of your thoughts as you listen to what I presented tonight? Did it spark anything for you? I'd love to hear. So it's a pre-recorded course. So in essence, you can start it whenever. Great question. So like I said, part of what we utilize in the course is this thing called the SYMBIS assessment, which SYMBIS, if you want to look it up, stands for, it's an acronym, Save Your Marriage Before It Starts. It's awfully long. I don't know why they came up with that name, but it is what it is. And so before you, I think it's like kind of right when you sign up, but we send you a link to be able to fill out the assessment. It's an assessment that is quite extensive, so it usually takes people about 30 to 60 minutes to fill it out, depending on how much you think about it, right? The different questions. And then we send you the assessment results. So you have those as you go through the course. And so module 1 is all about like your relationship dynamics, right? I dive really deep into like relationship patterns and different things like that. And then the rest of the modules is basically like a walkthrough of me explaining, hey, this is what each of these things means. And so as you look through the assessment, you can then take that information and then use it to apply it in that more specific way. So like, for example, one of the things that the module covers and the assessment covers is what's called your relational mindset. It's kind of like how you look at relationships. So for example, there's like a romantic relationship type and there's like the rational relationship type. And the assessment breaks down like, what does that look like and how do you then like blend those two? And in it, I talk about, in the course, I talk about this is what each thing means. And if you're this type, this is probably what that will look like in the context of your relationship. And then one thing that I really love to do if you're local, and even if you're not, we can do this virtually, is we like to offer a follow-up visit with me, which depending on your needs can look like a 30-minute thing or an hour thing, where I kind of talk with you about like, what did you take from this course? And how do you make sure it like really is applicable to your relationship? And so I personally love that because I love the like interaction piece more. But yeah, that's how we strive to make it more personalized for people. You can send them directly to me. So we can make sure that you have my email. And if you have questions specific to your relationship, I'm all ears. Like I love to get those kind of questions and stuff. And I can send you a quick email and be like, hey, like this is what I think about that thing and help you out in that direction. One of the things that we pride ourselves at and at Cash Valley Counseling is just the way that we operate is a little bit different than other clinics. We don't do some things to allow us to be able to do other things. And one of the things that I'm allowed to do is I have more time as a therapist kind of built in to be able to be connected to people. And so I like to make myself available. And so I don't even know any of you all, but I'm going to share my email with you. This is my work email, obviously. Feel free to copy that down somewhere. If you have any comments or questions about any of the things that we talked about today, if you're looking for additional resources like, hey, Spencer, what do I do with this? Or what would you recommend for that? I just want you to know that I am more than happy to answer your questions, okay? And again, I just like genuinely want to connect with people if they have questions and things. And just so you know, like I'm pretty direct with people. So if you ever send me a question that I'm like not able to answer properly over an email, or it's something that really you should address in like therapy or something like that, I'll let you know. So with that, I guess we'll wrap up unless there's any other questions that anyone has. Okay. Well, like I said, if you have anything, you're welcome to send me an email. I'd love to connect with you all that way. But thank you all for attending, for being a part of this tonight. And I wish you all a good rest of your night and hopefully I'll hear from you later. But again, thanks everyone. Bye.